Welcome. This is Susan Marshall from the Historical Society of the Phoenixville area. We're presenting this along with the Schuylkill River Heritage Center and the Chester County Town Walks and Village Tours. Today we are going to be visiting the Majolica collection at the Historical Society of the Phoenixville area, followed by an architectural tour given by Barbara Cohen of several buildings within the area. This will be a walking tour outdoors. If we were walking today, this is probably where you would have walked to. Lou Beccaria from the Beautification Advisory Commission in Phoenixville will be presenting the beautification program, telling you a little bit more about planters and some of the beautiful things you see around town, followed by Theresa, who will talk about the many murals that are in Phoenixville. We will be showing you images of each of these things. I hope you enjoy your tour. Thank you.
My name is Jack Ertel. Today we'll take a look at the Historical Society's collection of Etruscan Majolica pottery. Phoenixville is probably most famous for its iron and steel history. However, it had a thriving pottery industry here in the 1880s. And the primary company, of course, was Griffin, Smith and Hill. We're standing in the Clegg room of the Historical Society's museum. The room features over 120 pieces of pottery that are part of our collection of over 300 pieces of Etruscan Majolica pottery. Well, what was Etruscan Majolica pottery? It was a style of pottery produced in the late 19th century. It started in England in the 1850s, quickly became very popular throughout Europe and the United States. In the 1880s, an American company here in Phoenixville, known as Griffin, Smith and Hill, was named after four people, the Griffin brothers, Harry and George, David Smith and William Hill. And the four of them produced beautiful, lustrous, brightly colored, decorative pottery for more than 10 years. We have some great examples here in our museum. They are typical of the Victorian pottery of that era. Bright, colorful, highly decorative, featuring images of nature. When we look at the collection that Phoenixville produced, we can find sunflowers, animals of different types, birds, berries, plants, trees. They were produced in a very, very skillful manner, and in fact the Phoenixville company had a very, very great reputation for success. A lot of the pieces they produced are most famous for the colors that they used, and one of the most famous colors that helps identify the company is a pinkish purple color that was called orchid pink. They had a very, very large complex. They had a factory building about a block away from here in the lower part of the 100 block of Church Street. And they had three kilns that they had constructed that show how they would bake the pottery, actually bake it a couple times. They'd bake it, paint it, glaze it, and then bake it again so that it had the bright, lustrous shine. They built a couple very, very huge kilns. These are called bottle kilns if you look at the shape of them. And if you want a real sense of how large these were, these little vertical figures down at the bottom are the workers. So you can get a real sense of how high these were. Most of the pottery was manufactured by molds. Plates would be put in, formed in molds, and they would be stacked up in the kilns and then baked. But some of the other items were made by not only baking, but had to be made on a pottery wheel. And fortunately, in our collection that's been given to us through the years, we have some very interesting photographs of some of the potters at work. Here's an example of one, and you can see him working on a pottery wheel. And then here is another example of a worker from that time. The company employed over 40 workers at its peak. Many of them were women and children. People were paid piecework In other words, they were paid by what they were able to produce during the day. Wages weren't very good. The children and the young girls were paid less than a dollar a day. And in fact, a lot of the painting was actually done by teenage girls, and a lot of the yard work was done by young boys. This is a good example. This is an 1880s photograph of the male workers of the company. You have the Griffin brothers and Mr. Smith and Mr. Hill in the center, but I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom row, or the front row in this photograph. It consists of all young boys, roughly between the ages of 9 and 12. It was common in that era, of course, of child labor, when children would go to elementary school for 3 or 4 years to learn how to read and write. And particularly if they came from a poor family, they'd drop out of school so that they could help earn some wages for their family, to help support their family. And these young boys often did a lot of the grunt work in what was called the clay yard. They were called clay boys. A lot of the painting was done by young women. And we have a great photo in our collection that shows some of the young teenage girls who were painters. They really weren't paid very much. We have a record of an interview from someone in the 1880s who said they were paid 35 cents a day. So it isn't very much money, but in the 1880s, the average adult worker got about $1 a day. So you can get a sense of what that was. Well, we have a very, very broad collection of items here, and we often get asked, how do we know when a piece of pottery is actually Phoenixville-made Etruscan pottery? The best way to do it, of course, is if there's a potter's mark on the piece. A lot of their pieces did not have a potter's mark, and the kind of colors, which I mentioned before, the orchid pink is a good example because it was pretty much exclusive of the company. However, a lot of the pieces have a pottery mark that looks very much like this sketch. And if you look at it very carefully, it has a very stylized GSH for Griffin, Smith, and Hill in the center. And then surrounding it, it says Etruscan Majolica. This was the second pottery mark that they used during their time of production. If I hold up this bowl, and if you look very carefully, you can see, I'm going to turn it around so you can see Etruscan Majolica surrounded by the Griffin, Smith, and Hill mark. The company was very, very successful. They sold their products to retailers all over the United States. But we often get asked, well, what happened to the company? Because there's no evidence of them existing. Two things. First of all, Majolica pottery was a style that went in and out of fashion. It became fashionable in the 1850s, faded after 1900. On top of the declining interest in this kind of style, in the early 1890s, the factory, just down the street from the Historical Society, had a massive fire that destroyed much of their equipment, much of their building. The expense of rebuilding was greater than the financial ability of the company, and they basically closed their doors. Someone else came along a couple of years later, reopened it under another name, but was never as successful. Shortly after 1900, the land was sold, and the pottery kilns were torn down, and so there's no physical evidence left in town. But the Griffin, Smith, and Hill company and the products they produced is a great part of the historical legacy of Phoenixville, and we're very pleased to have the ability to display many, many pieces of the types that they manufactured in the 1880s.
My name is Barbara Cohen. I'm currently president of the Schuylkill River Heritage Center that is located in part of the historic Phoenixville Foundry. Behind me is a statue of David Reeves, who purchased the nail works in 1829 and the family owned the company until 1944. As you'll see in the array of buildings shown here, they were a wonderful, wonderful inspiration for many people to come and settle and succeed in Phoenixville. And we hope that you will also visit the community and visit our museum, as well as the Phoenixville Area Historical Society, because it's worth your time to come. Thank you. Welcome to Phoenixville. This is Phoenixville's gem, the historic foundry building, which has been restored. Okay, Chester Arthur was president, and there were 38 states in 1882. That's when the foundry was constructed. Like Philadelphia has Independence Hall, Phoenixville has an extraordinary building called the Foundry. We believe that Henry Hobson Richardson designed this building in what is called the Richardson Romanesque style. The stone for the building was quarried right here on the cliffs near the Schuylkill River. And every door and window is articulated with bricks that were made right at the McAvoy Brick Company just down the road. What's extraordinary about this building, given that it was constructed in 1882, are the clerestory windows. They were opened so that heat could escape from the furnaces and allow more light into the building. Later on in the early 20th century, Frank Lloyd Wright echoed this idea 40 years later when he designed the Roby House in Oak Park, Illinois. This extraordinary building was once part of the 130-acre Phoenix Iron and Steel Company. It is now home to an extraordinary museum called the Schuylkill River Heritage Center, and the major portion of the building features events. So if you're going to have a wedding or a corporate event or a senior prom, there is no place better than this iconic, historic, restored building that is the centerpiece of Phoenixville's history. We're on Church Street, near Phoenixville's historic downtown. This home is one of over 1,200 that is part of Phoenixville's historic district. What is unique about this home that is over 154 years old is that it is the only one in Phoenixville that used the same stone, the dark sandstone from the cliffs on the other side of the river, to build this house. It has a Gothic portico at the top, but it is truly an extraordinary, unique building in Phoenixville. We're at 206 Main Street, and again, this is a home that is part of Phoenixville's historic district, a very special place. Thomas Schaefer was superintendent at the Phoenix Iron Company, and he was an employee for over 3 generations of the Reeves family, which owned the company from 1829 to 1944. What is so special about this particular home is that it is in a Dutch colonial style. You see the step-like arrangement of the stones near the roof line. And again, like the foundry, every door and window is articulated with the stone. The same stone as we saw on Church Street is used here in the former Thomas Schaffner home. It is again a very special, unique place that is part of Phoenixville's not only historic legacy, but architectural legacy as well, because it was built in 1866, 1 year after the Civil War was over. We're now here at the Thomas Byrne Mansion. He started out as an Irish immigrant who was an orphan, established a ladies' corset lace factory after working 15 years as a machinist at the Phoenix Iron Company. And it was the first building in the United States to have an interior fire sprinkler system. The mansion was built in 1896. It reflects a classical style that was made popular after the Chicago World's Fair that was held in 1893. It is an extraordinary building that has now been adaptively reused. But Thomas Byrne also is a reflection of Phoenixville's legacy, where all immigrants of all colors and all religious persuasions were welcome. Everyone could get a job at the mill. We're here at a wonderful home built in 1888 in what they call the Romantic style. This emerged because there were so many people moving to cities as the United States started to grow and industrialize. Thoreau wrote The Walden Pond, and Whitman's poetry evinced a walk in the woods to get away from the sound and the noise of the city. And the style of architecture changed in the 1880s to what they call the Romantic style. And you see here a combination of various different decorations on the building. You notice the color decoration of the porch. You notice a French-style cupola near the top of the building. What made this building also quite famous is the fact that it was used in a movie called The Blob that has made Phoenixville famous, and part of the movie was filmed here at this house, starring Steve McQueen in 1958. It is still shown annually at the historic Colonial Theater. We are here 1 block away from Thomas Byrne's mansion. He was so successful in his manufacturing that, having been a young man, an orphan, his mother had died when he was 2 weeks old. He founded St. Anne's Church, and this Gothic-style building was constructed in the early 20th century. This Catholic church was a memory to his mother, whom he never knew, but it also attests to the success of Thomas Byrne and so many other immigrants in showing their loyalty and love for their families. And they could all succeed by settling and working here in Phoenixville.
Hello everyone, I'm Lou Beccaria, the chairperson of the Beautification Advisory Commission. I'd like to review a little bit about the Beautification Advisory Commission, tell you a little bit about the history and some of the programs that we've developed over the last 7 years. In terms of the history, it all goes back to 2013 when I went to the Economic Development Committee of the Borough Council and suggested that we might have some kind of a body to encourage the beautification of the borough, because the economic development was going great and that maybe the borough could look a little bit better from a beautification standpoint. Well, the borough just bought it right away, and what is now the Beautification Advisory Commission started out as a subcommittee of the Economic Development Committee of the Borough Council. And about 1.5 years later, in September of 2014, the Borough Council elevated the status of the committee to what is now the Beautification Advisory Commission. So we've started several different kinds of programs, and one of them is at the care of the iron pot planters that people see. There's 24 of them down on Bridge Street. They were initially put there by the Borough Council in 2004. But in 2013, when the Beautification Advisory Commission came into existence, we assumed the adoption or sponsorship of those, if you will. And when I say sponsorship, every year for $150 per planter, people can sponsor 3 seasons of plantings for the spring, the summer, and the fall, and get a nameplate to recognize either individuals or families or businesses or community organizations. Their sponsorship can be recognized. We have an opportunity on the borough's website. If you go on to click on commissions, and then when you get to commissions, click on the Beautification Advisory Commission. You will see that there is an opportunity to fill out an application for the sponsorship of the Iron Pot Planners. I'd like to do a shout out to Colonial Gardens Nursery, because Eric Schmidt, who is the owner of that nursery, does a tremendous job with our commission. Aside from being a member of the commission, Colonial Gardens and Eric do the landscape plans for the landscaping projects that we've done, and maintain the Iron Pot Planners, all below cost. So it's a very good and important community contribution that Eric and Colonial Gardens Nursery is making to Phoenixville. The next program I'd like to highlight is the Beautification Achievement Awards. The Beautification Achievement Awards were started in 2016, and we started out with 2 categories. And the purpose of the awards is to recognize people who are doing things currently to beautify their property. And then the second purpose is to encourage others to be motivated to do the same thing. So in 2016, we started with 2 categories, the residential category and the business category. And since 2016, we have recognized several private residences, the owners of the private residences, and the businesses. In 2018, we actually expanded the awards into a 3rd category, and that category are the community organizations, nonprofit community organizations in town that have also taken a step to do their part to beautify the community. 2 of the examples of that are the Historical Society, Phoenixville Historical Society, and the public library at the Phoenixville Public Library. So we are an activist type organization. We have 4 goals. Basically all revolve around trying to make the community a more beautiful community, try to educate the community about the history and the diversity of this community. And one of our goals also is to actually secure more resources to help us do our projects. I would like to say that the borough has been very generous since the beginning of the Beautification Advisory Commission, giving us a small allotment every year, and that is supplemented by the fundraising that we do with selling of posters and what have you to finance the projects that we have. And we also accept donations from the community, so if anybody is motivated to do that, we'd be more than happy to accept your donation. So thank you. We are very happy to have the Beautification Advisory Commission as an integral part of the Borough of Phoenixville.
Hi, my name is Theresa Haig, and I have lived in Phoenixville since 2011. I'm an artist, and I'm one of the artists that created one of the many murals in Phoenixville. So I'm here today to talk to you about some of the art that you'll find when you come visit us in our town. It really all started back in 2014 when Cynthia Oswald, an artist who lived on the north side of town, came up with an idea to paint a mural on a blank wall that's stood up at the top of one of the streets in Phoenixville. And she came to the Beautification Advisory Commission, which is the commission that is designated to approve the murals and other community art projects in town. And so this was really the start of the movement of community art in Phoenixville. And I want you to just take a minute and think about what it would be like to walk into your home and have all of the walls be blank. And I want you to think about how that would make you feel if you woke up to blank walls in your bedroom, blank walls in your living room. And that's what it was like in Phoenixville before the arts program really took off. We have this rich history, but we weren't really sharing it, and we had all this vision and ideas for our future, and that wasn't apparent either. And so when we brought in the mural artists into town, we started seeing, really paying homage to our past and creating these vibrant and rich visions for our future. The Welcome to Phoenixville mural, and that was one that I was selected to create for our town. And my concept with that mural was to create this feeling of somebody leaving a light on for you when you come in late. This beacon saying, "Thank you for visiting. We're so excited to have you here. Welcome home." And so we decided to go with a past image of the steel mill, since that's really what Phoenixville was founded on. One of my favorite parts of creating the mural was when folks from Phoenixville who grew up here, whose parents grew up here, whose grandparents grew up here, came and shared stories of what Phoenixville was like when the steel mill was still producing steel, when the majority of our town was still being employed through the steel mill. And I really got this wonderful history of what it was really like. And that's what I tried really hard to infuse into the mural itself. Owned by Manny Demutis across the street, Charles Segal created the Phoenix. And that was a wonderful contrast to the Welcome to Phoenixville mural, because that was really paying homage to our future. This idea of rebirth, resurgence, new buildings, new community. And I think as you come into town, you get the hit of both of those, and it's really something exciting, and I hope you get to experience that. We have several other murals in town, some done by myself, the Gateway Pharmacy mural, as well as the one you can find when you walk inside Borough Hall called View from the North Side. Charles Segal also has a few others. One is one of my favorites, and it's hidden behind the Colonial Theater, so you'll have to go find it. It's called The Dancers, and it's really something special that not many people know about. He also did the kites, and you'll see that on the side of Iron Hill Brewery, on the side of that wall. In 2017, when we realized the impact community art was having in our town, the Beautification Advisory Commission thought that it would be great to expand out into the utility boxes and do small murals on the utility boxes around town. That was kicked off by Alyssa Hilton doing River Time, and that one you can find at 101 Bridge Street. This is a really exciting mural, and it also welcomes you when you come into town, flanked by the two murals that I just talked about. Since 2017, we have done 9 utility boxes in town, and this year we're going to be expanding out to do 4 more. It's an exciting project. People are really enjoying the different perspectives artists are bringing to town, and it creates really great conversation pieces. One of the ones that gets the most talk about is the dog mural that you'll find at Main and Bridge Street, and I encourage you to go look at it. And at this point, we have so much exciting artists that are moving into town that have lived here forever with so much vision, and they just really want to continue creating this connection, this meaning for people when they're here in Phoenixville. Our history is vast, our future is really strong, and we have so many great artists to help portray that and help you as the viewer really feel like you're part of something special. When you come visit us in town, there's a few gems that you must check out. Right now, the mural that's going up in Renaissance Park is actually refurbished from a 1994 mural of the steel mill. It's magnificent, it soars 4 stories, and it is just such a great reflection of who we are as a community and where we've come from. Now, if you just take Main Street up from that mural, you're going to run into another mosaic mural that is wonderful. It sparkles. It's done in Andre Thornton Park by an artist named Lynn Miller. Her and her team created this beautiful piece that really catches your eye as you're going up into the north side of our town. There's so much to see here in Phoenixville. Around every corner you'll see art, and we really look forward to having you come visit us in the future. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed this video today. There is a map showing all the locations of the various architectural sites, the utility boxes, and the murals. If you're interested in getting a copy of the map, you may find it at the Historical Society's website, hspa-pa.org.